The Kairouan Grand Mosque in Tunisia is a truly impressive sight, standing with this minaret rising around 31 metres high, overlooking a vast complex that covers roughly 9,000 square metres in total. And that scale makes a lot more sense when you realise just how many people this place can actually hold. As at times of major prayer, especially on Fridays or religious occasions, several thousand worshippers, which often include 5,000 people or more, can actually gather here at once, filling the courtyard and the prayer hall with a sense of scale that only really makes sense when you're actually standing in the middle of it. As when we actually visited and heard that kind of number, it really puts things into perspective, because this isn't just a monument that you actually go to look at, it's actually a working place of worship that still draws people from across the region today. And knowing how important this site is and the place it stands within the history of North Africa, it quickly became clear that this was somewhere that we actually needed to see for ourselves. But not to see just for the architecture, but to also actually understand what makes a place like this so significant in the very first place. And actually, why was it actually built here at all? But to actually understand why the Great Mosque of Kairouan actually exists here, you have to actually first go back to the 7th century, where North Africa was undergoing a major transformation, as this region had previously been influenced by the Byzantine Empire and earlier still by the Carthaginian civilization. But by this time, it was becoming part of an expanding early Islamic world. But control of the coastline was still unstable, and coastal settlements were very vulnerable to naval attacks and shifting political control. Because of this, the decision was actually made to actually move inland. So the location chosen for Kairouan was not accidental. It was far enough from the coast to actually reduce the risk of attack, but still close enough to fertile land and overland routes that connected to different parts of North Africa. It was here that this particular Arab general established a new settlement under the new caliphate, and at its earliest stage, Kairouan was not a city in the traditional sense. It was more of a frontier military settlement, likely home to only a few thousand people, mostly soldiers, their families, and those supporting the garrison. But at the centre of the settlement, a simple mosque was built, and it was constructed using whatever materials were actually available at the time, like mud brick, wood, and stone, including reused fragments from nearby Roman and Byzantine ruins. It was a functional space, not a monumental one, a place for communal prayer and gathering at the heart of a new and uncertain settlement. But the region remained unstable in these early years. Local resistant movements, shifting control, and wider conflicts across North Africa meant that Kairouan was exposed to repeated periods of disruption. As during one of these phases of conflict, the earlier mosque was destroyed along with parts of the settlement itself. But however, the city was never actually abandoned, as control was re-established by the same broader governing forces that had originally founded it. So Kairouan was rebuilt in 703 CE, with the mosque being constructed again by the same community. This time though, the approach was more deliberate, with the mosque being rebuilt using stronger materials and a more structured design, reflecting a growing attention for permanence rather than temporary occupation. But it was not designed as a fortress, but built to endure, so it would not have been repeatedly replaced. Then as the city became more stable, its population slowly increased and the mosque became central to daily life. It was used for communal prayer, gatherings and decision making, serving as a spiritual and social heart of the settlement. Then over time, Kairouan also began to attract people from surrounding regions, which in turn slowly increased its importance as a recognised centre of settlement and faith. Then by the 9th century, the city developed significantly under this particular dynasty, which governed the region on behalf of this particular caliphate. This was one of the key rulers during this particular period who actually oversaw major transformation of the mosque. Now, and rather than simply repairing or expanding it, this decision was made to actually completely rebuild it and enlarge the structure itself to reflect the growing importance of Kairouan itself. Now, there was no single recorded architect of the project. Instead, it was likely designed and executed by teams of craftsmen and builders working under the state direction, with a significant portion of the materials used coming from earlier Roman and Byzantine ruins across the region again, including dismantled columns and carved stone elements from sites such as Carthage and other former settlements. These materials were then transported and reused, meaning that many parts of the mosque are actually older than the structure itself. Construction likely took place over several years during the 9th century, resulting in a large courtyard and expanded prayer hall, and one of the earliest known minarets in the Islamic world. When it was actually completed, the mosque stood apart not because of decoration, but because of its scale, structure, and influence. Its architectural layout became reference point for later mosques across North Africa, helping define the emergent style of the Islamic religious architecture in the region. But beyond its physical presence, the mosque also became a centre of learning. By the late 9th century into the 10th century, it had gradually developed into an intellectual hub where scholars gathered to teach and study. Though this development was not sudden, but actually a result of increasing scholarly activity and the growing reputation of Kairouan as a place of knowledge. Teaching was actually carried out in traditional study circles, usually within the mosque's courtyard or prayer hall. Scholars would sit and teach while the students gathered around them to listen, memorize, and to discuss ideas. These teachings focused primarily on Islamic law and theology, but also included language and the broader intellectual discussions. Now, over time, the ideas developed here spread far beyond Kairouan, helping shape legal and religious practices across much of North and West Africa, with the school in particular becoming dominant in the region, and its influence still continues in some areas to this day. But at its height, Kairouan was regarded as one of the most important intellectual centres in the Islamic world, and there is a long-standing tradition that considers it among one of the most significant holy cities in Islam, reflecting its historical and spiritual importance. However, though, by the 11th century, this period of growth began to decline. As with the movement of the Benu Halal across North Africa, it began disrupting established political and economic systems in the region. Their migration, though, was partly encouraged by shifting political powers, which actually led to widespread instability across inland areas of North Africa. Now, as a result, agricultural systems, trade routes, and long-distance travel networks began to break down or shift towards more secure coastal regions. This had a huge direct impact on Kairouan. As the trade routes changed, the city became less central to regional commerce, leading to travel becoming more difficult and few scholars making the journey here. Now, gradually, its role as a major intellectual centre slowly diminished. However, though, the mosque continued to function as a place of prayer for the local population, and it remained active in daily religious life, even as its wider influence did decline. Now, centuries later, though, during the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire expanded into North Africa, gradually taking control of the region, including Tunisia, with Kairouan being incorporated into their wider system of governance, but was never restored as a major political or intellectual centre. Instead, it remained as a local religious city, and the mosque continued to serve as a primary place of worship for that surrounding population, maintaining its historical significance, with its preservation over time coming through a combination of local care and recognition by successive governing authorities, even if it was no longer central to political life. Then in 1988, the Great Mosque of Kairouan was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognising its outstanding historical and architectural value as one of the most important early Islamic monuments in North Africa. Today, its preservation and maintenance are overseen by Tunisian authorities, with UNESCO providing international recognition and support to help protect the site for future generations. But despite its global status, this is not a museum piece. It is still very much an active place of worship, where local residents continue to use it for daily prayers and Friday congregations, keeping the mosque at the centre of religious life in the city. Visitors, though, still travel here from across Tunisia, North Africa, and beyond. Some for religious significance, others for history, and some simply coming to actually understand what makes this place so important. As visiting the site today is a really unique experience. There are still very clear expectations when you're entering, including an appropriate dress code for both men and women. As even me, as a male, I was wearing shorts and I had to cover up properly before entering, just the same as applying to the rest of my family as well. But rather than just feeling very restrictive, it actually added to the experience, as it just reinforced that this is still a living religious space, not just a historical monument. With walking through the mosque itself, you can see that people are praying in the same spaces that have been used for over 1,000 years, and that contrast between history and daily life makes it even more special experience. Then on the outside of the mosque, the city of Kairouan continues to function just like normal and an everyday kind of place. You have like your cafes, your streets, and your local life carrying on around it. Now you have one of those cafes where you can actually go up to the rooftop terrace and get a completely different perspective by looking down over the mosque and the surrounding city from above. It's one of those moments where like the scale of everything really actually starts to come together. But what also makes this place even more special to visit is that it's not just limited to the actual mosque itself, as nearby there are still educational spaces and institutions, including places that actually teach the Quran, which you can actually go and see, who still continue traditions of learning that once made Kairouan such an important and intellectual centre. So even today, this isn't a place where you visit to look at history, it's also a place where history is actually still happening, with a city that's still built around its past and a mosque that has never stopped being what it was actually built to be.